Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto, and in this video I'm gonna be doing some super wide angle photography. I also have a couple of tips for you guys that may help you in your super wide photography. But before I get into my photography, please consider subscribing to my channel and activate the bell icon so you'll get a notification whenever I post a new video. And I usually post on Tuesdays and on Fridays. And this location is brand new, and by that I mean literally. This is a brand new shopping center that's been open for public only for about 2 weeks now. So it's really new. But now I think it's time to find some compositions. Okay, not bad. The opening in the ceiling forms a nice framing. My half-second exposure gives me just about the right motion blur. I only wish there were more people downstairs, but this was the most I could get in one frame. This could be a case for multiple exposure or combining several frames in Photoshop. But nevertheless, not a bad first shot of the day. I have only been here once before, very briefly when I was meeting with a friend. And back then I didn't have time to properly look around. So now I'm back with my Lumix G90 and the 8 to 18mm super wide angle lens, and now I'm gonna have a proper look around. I think this low angle shot may work, and it's always good to remember that eye level or waist level is not nearly always the best angle or point of view. So it's good to experiment with low, extremely low angles, or of course high angles too. I had to take quite a few frames to get all those people in the foreground. I like that everyone's heading to a different direction and everyone's looking at the different direction. I also like the motion blur. It's a nice contrast to all those still standing people in the background. The only thing I'm not sure about is the upper part of the frame, so I made a cropped version like this. This forces you to concentrate on just the people in the foreground and your eyes are not wandering in the upper parts of the frame, which doesn't add too much to the composition after all. Which one is better? What do you think? I wonder who designed these rails. You can't put your camera on it, it just slides away. But there can be a shot here, so I'm gonna try that. Okay, not bad. There's a nice flow in the escalators and a real sense of the crowd here. But then I moved to my left just a couple of meters and I got this one, which works much better, I think. Those arches form a nice frame, and it looks like there's a lot more crowd in this picture. I have a 0.8 second exposure, and that gives the flow in the escalators. But also in this one I wish there were more people in the bottom level of the mall. A super wide lens is of course the obvious choice in this kind of location. But because I'm not using my super wide that often, I wanted to take it out today and try it here. But a super wide is no stranger to me. I have used it in my job as a photographer many times whenever I need it, as you can see from these couple of examples that I'm showing you here. But I just don't use it very often in my personal work. I really do appreciate the excellent stabilizer on my G90, but I still think that in some cases a good tripod is really worth it, because then you can compose so much more carefully. Because you know, when you are hand holding your camera, you can't possibly check all the four corners of the frame at the same time as well as you can with a tripod. But I thought that this place is far too hectic and busy to set up a tripod in the middle of somewhere here. So I'm counting on my stabilizer and doing everything handheld today. But how about you guys? Do you use a super wide angle often? And if you use, for what kind of photography or in what kind of photo situations? Alright, here's one
kind of neat abstract that could work, so let's give it a try.
There certainly are some interesting lines, colors and surfaces here, but I think it's not particularly interesting or strong image. Especially the upper part of the frame is a bit too empty, and those triangular holes in the ceiling are just not enough there. I don't think this is bad, but it's not great either. Let's move on.
I think a shopping mall like this or some other man-made interior is a good place for a super wide angle, because it's relatively easy to find compositions that fill the frame with some sense, you know. In landscape photography, for example, it can be a lot harder to find something in the foreground that makes some sense or adds to the composition. But here everything is so compact that you can easily change your composition or find a new composition altogether. Everything is within just a couple of minutes of walk, and it's not raining.
Okay, let's see how this works. Again, some motion blur. But I think it may work better even without some movement or people if I can, find a slot where there is no people in the frame. In this one, I'm too fixated on the black lines in the shot, but there's really nothing else in it, and it doesn't work. This could work if there was a steady flow of people across the frame and that motion blur through the stairs. But as it is, it just doesn't make a picture. I'm only showing you this to remind you that you can't always make it, and it's good to learn from your mistakes.
Always, whenever you are shooting, of course, it's very important to check the edges and the corners of the frame. But with the super wide angle, it's even more important, because it's so easy to get your attention only to the mid part of the frame and then forget about the corners and the edges, and then end up with some unnecessary junk in the outer parts of the frame.
This one came out pretty well, and I like it a lot. I like the motion blur, and I like the lines in the floor. But again, in this one, I wish there were more people in the shot, but this was the most I could get in one frame. This could also be the case for photoshopping together multiple frames and create the illusion of more crowd. But as it is, I still like this picture, one of the best I got today.
It's also interesting that even though this place is kind of crowded, it seems that the crowd doesn't want to collaborate with me that well. I mean, every time I want to make a composition with some people in it, it seems that nobody in the frame is in the right place. Does that ever happen to you when you are shooting in public? Every time I'm using a super wide angle lens, it occurs to me how misleading it is to call a lens a perspective correction lens. After all, no lens can correct any perspective. It all happens in camera, believe it or not. Because in order to get the straight lines straight in your shot, you have to have your camera sensor parallel to the surface that you're shooting. Most of the time, you have to have your camera straight up and level, if you're shooting buildings, for example. With those so-called perspective correction lenses, you can then shift the lens and change the composition without moving your camera. But the lens can't correct the perspective if your camera sensor is not parallel to the surface that you are shooting. Therefore, I think calling that kind of a lens a tilt-shift lens is much more appropriate, and it describes the lens or the lens's purpose much better. I'm crawling on the floor a lot today. Another low-angle shot here.
Okay, in this one I got some blue and yellow complementary colors, which always work well. And there's also the same yellow in the right part of the frame in the ceiling. I also like the rail that goes diagonally across the frame, and it forms the same kind of arch that the ceiling in the background. I'm reasonably happy with this picture, and it's by far the best abstract shot that I got today.
I think I'm done for now. I don't seem to find anything really new and interesting competition anymore. I hope you enjoyed this little tour in this brand new shopping center and my pictures, and I hope you found some of these tips useful in your photography. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Some overpriced coffee. As my good friend Robin Wong says, you just gotta have some overpriced coffee after the shoot.